Who is this geeky-looking guy who's being treated like a rock star? Oh, it's Congressman Ron Paul, that Texas libertarian who was ignored in Congress for decades until recently when people started talking about a Ron Paul revolution.
Sounds to me like the revolution is alive and well.
Revolution? What's he talking about? Well, for a congressman, he does have different ideas about government.
But you take care of yourself. Don't ask the government for anything.
The left mocks him for that.
I do like the theory, by the way, of self-reliance. But when you get into the real world, it doesn't work.
And many on the right don't like his anti-war views.
I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11th.
Republicans applauded that criticism. But then, at the biggest conference of conservatives, Republicans chose him over all the presidential candidates.
Thank you.
What if he did win? What would he say in a debate against the president? Or, well, this guy?
Let me be clear. Now, the government has to lead.
Maybe if the government got out of the way, we would have high-speed transportation.
What would a Ron Paul presidency be like? That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
For decades, we libertarians have been dismissed as a collection of naive crackpots who want government to be so limited that no serious politicians would call us anything but fringe. Some people still say that. But these days, there are more libertarians for them to contend with. Libertarians were a big part of the Tea Party, and now more politicians talk about cutting spending. Imagine that. And the one man who's probably done more than anyone to make that happen is Congressman and potential Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul. So thank you for joining us. You obviously have fans here. Fine. At the last CPAC conference, where he beat the other Republicans in the straw poll, he talked about how entitlement programs are unsustainable, and as a thought experiment, he suggested this.
But would you consider opting out of the whole system under one condition? You pay 10% of your income, but you take care of yourself. Don't ask the government for anything.
There was big applause for that. But, and there's applause here, but when I posed that question to my studio audience, another one, young people were very skeptical. What? I wouldn't get my student loan? And Chris Matthews sneered at the idea.
You're never going to go onto a federal highway again. You're never going to go to an airport that is regulated by FAA. You're never going to eat a can of tuna fish because it might inspect it for tow main. Yeah. You're going to do your own inspections for tow main. Right. You're going to inspect that.
And your own cancer research, don't forget about that. And you're going to defend yourself if we're invaded by Canada.
You're going to defend yourself.
Unregulated airports. He suggests the planes will smash into each other.
And I have this argument a lot in Washington about, I will make this statement that we don't need all these federal regulations. Oh, he doesn't want any regulations. Well, when it comes to economics or airlines, you would have other people regulating, the property owners, the airlines. And
the airlines don't want to kill their customers?
That is absolutely. They might even be able to provide security. They may even be able to replace the TSA if they realize how they could do that.
He says we'll have poisoned tuna.
Tuna.
Without the government to keep the food safe.
Well, what he's using is fear tactics, and they all do that, whether it's financial, foreign policy, or for environmental things. They'll just use fear to intimidate and try to get people
but people think it's the government that keeps the food safe.
Yeah, well, they think wrongly.
It's the food companies that keep their food safe because they want to protect their own reputation,
right.
Their brand.
And in a free society, they are liable and responsible. I think once government comes in with the regulations and they regulate something bad, then it affects everyone, and they're protected because the government said it was okay to do this.
He says there'll be no cancer research.
And he's absolutely wrong about that. There may be better directed cancer research and not politically directed research. So he's wrong on that.
He said we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves.
Well, I think we'd be a lot more able to defend ourselves because he doesn't believe much probably in the Second Amendment. And if you believe in a free society, believe in the Second Amendment, that's where your real protection comes from.
And you support defense as a role for government. If Canada attacks us, we should fight back, right?
That's right. I use Canada as a good example. We should treat all countries like Canada as our friends and trading partners and don't give them any foreign aid.
All right, well, enough for now. Yes, sir.
Dr. Paul, my name is Nathan Cox. I'm from Virginia, and I wanted to start off by saying that you, a lot of people say that you cured their apathy, and you cured mine while I was in Baghdad in 07, 08, and I wanted to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Wait a second. You're in Baghdad fighting. He's saying you shouldn't be there, and that cured your apathy?
Yes, sir. I had a friend of mine from Texas who told me to check out what Ron Paul was saying while I was over there, and I started YouTubing the presidential debates that were going on over there. And everything that you said, sir, just made sense. And I started buying your books, and I started sharing that with my peers.
You know, when the campaign was going on 4 years ago, that subject, of course, came up, and it turned out that in that primary race, I got more support from the military people than all the rest put together, which made me feel good. And you know, I'm not surprised because at first I said, oh boy, that's great, that's a little surprising. But then I got to thinking, you know, I was in the military for 5 years in the 60s, and I wasn't around begging, boy, I sure hope Johnson gets us more involved. I'm anxious to go over to Vietnam, you know.
With that in mind, we have barely touched on that, your biggest issue. Dr. Paul has said that our presence in the Middle East is one reason we were attacked on September 11th, and that made some people mad.
We invited the attack because we were attacking Iraq. I don't think I've ever heard that before, and I've heard some pretty absurd explanations for September 11th.
The crowd applauded Giuliani. Ron Paul's answer when we come back.
We libertarians say government is too big and it does too much. But one thing that government is supposed to do, and it says so here in the Constitution, is provide for the common defense. If people want to kill us, we need a military to defend us. But at a conference of conservatives, Congressman Ron Paul criticized conservatives who support an aggressive foreign policy.
They believe that we have this moral responsibility to use force to go around the world and say, you will do it our way or else. Well, force doesn't work. It never works.
Force never works? What about World War II? Force can work.
Defensive force, sure, it better work. You know, if you're a freedom-loving nation and somebody comes and attacks you or us, yes, we should use force in retaliation. So there's a difference in which way you're using the force.